This morning I want to talk to you about the idea of spiritual persistence. And I'd like you to actually be thinking about some sort of mountain in your life. I suppose it could be a great big goal that you're working toward. Sometimes that can feel like a mountain. Or it might be a big problem that you're trying to find your way around, over, or through. But have something in your mind as you listen into some of the ideas that I want to share with you. The message this morning is built around one of the Psalms. You may know that the Psalms were actually songs. They were sung. The Hebrews would take spiritual ideas and put them into songs, and they would sing them as a way to remember some of their journeys, some of their hardships, some of their hopes, some of their promises. The psalm that I want to share with you today is Psalm 37. And for those of you who've been part of Unity, and especially this community, for a long time, it's going to sound a little religious. So don't let that get in the way, okay? Sometimes those of us who are metaphysicians have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We want nothing to do with anything in the Bible because, well, for lots of different reasons, some of them very good ones. But let us not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there is a tremendous amount of wisdom in the Bible, as is true in all the world's sacred texts. Especially in the Bible, though, we must look at it mystically, metaphysically, and symbolically. So please don't let some of the wording get in your way. First of all, our teacher and way shower, Jesus, turned to the Old Testament. That's what he had. It wasn't called the Old Testament, it was called the Torah. But he turned to it frequently for his spiritual sustenance. He turned more than any other book to the book of Psalms for teaching, for practice, for working through some of the issues in his life. So here is Psalm 37. I consider it to be a psalm of persistence, a psalm that, when understood, can help us move that mountain. Here we go. Do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. Do not fret. So those are parts of Psalm 37. You probably haven't heard the word Lord so often in this church in a very long time. And yet, mystically and metaphysically, the word Lord means spiritual law. Spiritual law. Say that with me. Spiritual law. So now listen to that statement, substituting Lord with spiritual law. Do not fret. Trust in spiritual law. Those of us in Unity are in Unity because we do believe that there are spiritual principles at work in the universe, and that we are to understand what those principles are and to align ourselves with those principles. Whether it is the principle of cause and effect, or sowing and reaping, or the principle of unconditional love, or the principle and practice of prayer and meditation, or serving, or transcending our past, we are to trust in the outworking of divine law. And when we do, mountains begin to move. When we do, our life begins to work in much better ways than they ever have before. Do not fret. Trust in the law. Trust in spiritual principle, the outworking of spiritual principle. To do that requires some faith, some mountain-moving faith. In Hebrews, we're told that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What do we do in metaphysics? But we hold a vision of that which we want to bring forth in our life, even though that vision is not yet in physical manifest form. That is a demonstration of faith. That is a demonstration of trusting in the outworking of law, that what we hold in consciousness, in mind, coupled with emotion, coupled with feeling, followed by action, brings forth in concrete form. That we are, in fact, co-creators with Spirit. Jesus said, if you have faith, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will what? Move. I want to read a true story to you. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do a little more reading this morning than I usually do, because I don't want to miss any of the important parts of this story. True story. A small congregation in the foothills of the Great Smokies built a new sanctuary on a piece of land willed to them by a church member. 10 days before the church was to open, the local building inspector informed the pastor that the parking lot was inadequate for the size of the building. Oh boy, I would not have wanted to be in his shoes to get that word. Until the church doubled the size of the parking lot, they would not be able to use the new sanctuary. Unfortunately, the church, with its undersized lot, had used every inch of their land except for the mountain against which it had been built. In order to build more parking spaces, they would have to move the mountain out of their backyard. They would meet that evening with all the members who felt that they had mountain-moving faith. They would hold a prayer session asking God to remove the mountain from the backyard and somehow provide enough money to have it paved and painted before the scheduled opening dedication service the following week. I wonder if it would have happened in San Diego, though. Very tough building codes in California. Even bigger mountain-moving faith. At the appointed time, 24 of the congregation's 300 members assembled for prayer. They prayed for nearly 3 hours. At 10 o'clock, the pastor said the final amen. And then he said, we'll open next Sunday as scheduled. God has never let us down before, and I believe he will be faithful this time too. The next morning, as the pastor was working in his study, there came a loud knock at his door. He said, come on in, and he found standing before him a rough-looking construction foreman who removed his hard hat as he entered and said, excuse me, Reverend, I'm from Davis Construction Company over in the next county. We're building a huge new shopping mall over there, and we need some fill dirt. Do you think you'd be willing to sell us a chunk of that mountain behind the church? We'll even pay you for the dirt we remove and pave all the exposed area free of charge if we can have it right away. We can't do anything else until we get the dirt in and allow it to settle properly. Can you believe it? The little church was dedicated the next Sunday as originally planned, and there were far more members that Sunday with mountain-moving faith on opening Sunday than there had been the previous week. So the question to you is, would you have shown up at the first prayer session? Yes. Good. To sit there in prayer, and to sit there in prayer believing that somehow, some way, there was going to be an answer, that you just couldn't predict ahead of time what that answer could be. That is literally mountain-moving faith, to trust in spiritual law above what seems to make logical sense, to somehow know that miracles can and do happen, that we can align ourselves with a presence and a power and a purpose and a vision, and amazing and mighty things can happen. A second element of this psalm is the element, commit your way to the Lord and do good. So let's substitute our metaphysical understanding. It is commit your way to spiritual law and do good. Commit your way to spiritual law and do good. What does that mean? Commitment is to do and make sure you do what you set out to do, no questions asked. It is to make a decision and then not waver from that decision. You see, when we are in that state of indecision, we waffle back and forth. We're here a minute, we're there the next minute. Our energy is divided. But when we finally get that this is it, whatever it is, that this is it, this is the goal, or this is a problem, or this is a project I'm working through, and we commit to it, things begin to break loose and to open up. There is power in commitment. Perhaps you remember these words from William Murray of the Himalayan expedition. They're powerful words and very true words and descriptive words of the power of commitment. He said, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth. One elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. It's as if the whole of the universe is there to work around you and through you. All sorts of things, he writes, all sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. Why? Because commitment results in clarity. The universe operates with that clarity. It knows what it is you are setting out to do. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. In other words, when we commit to the law, when we commit to what it is we are working toward wholeheartedly, that commitment is a magnetizing factor that opens doors, that brings people or opportunities or answers or solutions into our life that would not have come if we were in that confused, indecisive state. And then he writes, I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Another piece of the psalm that helps us with this idea of persistence is the phrase, refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Sounds so Old Testament, doesn't it? Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. What that says to me is that just as it is important to know what to do, which commitment is really about, it is also important to know what not to do. To refrain from anger could mean just that, to refrain from anger. Anger does not serve us well. It could mean other things as well, though. It means refraining from anything that's going to hold you back. It means knowing the value of what to say no to. Knowing the value of what to say no to. Oftentimes in my meditation, besides visualizing and focusing on that which I am committed to and wanting to bring forth, I will also check in with God, with Spirit, with that still small voice, and ask, and is there something I need to let go? Is there something I need to turn away from? Is there something that I need to refrain from so that I am as open as I possibly can be to that which matters most? And then finally, pulling from this parts of the psalm that I wanted to share with you, is the idea of being still and waiting. The idea of being patient, the idea of understanding that some things do take time, and that there is a natural unfolding and evolution of the divine plan for your life, for my life, for humanity as a whole. And that while there is certainly action that we must take when the action is clear, there are also times that the best thing we can do is to be still, to wait to move when we are clear what the movement is to be by that still, small voice within, to wait for the Lord, to wait for the outworking of spiritual law, to be willing to set aside our plan for a higher and greater purpose and plan. Have you noticed that some of the most important things do take time and patience? Nod your head if you've noticed that. And have you also noticed that your time is not necessarily divine time? Yeah, oh yeah. So I want to close with a true story, yet again, that demonstrates a certain amount of patience. And I share this to balance out what might have felt a little too biblical of a lesson for some of us. Neil Armstrong and his walk on the moon. On July 20th, 1969, as commander of the Apollo 11 lunar module, Neil Armstrong was the first person to set foot on the moon. How many of you remember watching that, right? I bet you can remember exactly where you were when you saw that. His first words after stepping on the moon, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Those words were televised to Earth and heard by millions of people. But just before he re-entered the lander, he made the enigmatic remark, "Good luck, Mr. Gorski." Many people at NASA thought it was a casual remark concerning some rival Soviet cosmonaut. However, upon checking, there was no Gorski in either the Russian or American space programs. Over the years, many people questioned Armstrong as to what the "Good luck, Mr. Gorski" statement meant, but Armstrong always just smiled. On July 5th, 1995, in Tampa Bay, Florida, while answering questions following a speech, a reporter brought up the 26-year-old question to Armstrong. Now that's patience. This time he finally responded. Mr. Gorski had died, so Armstrong felt he could answer the question. In 1938, when Armstrong was a kid in a small Midwest town, he was playing baseball with a friend in the backyard. His friend hit a fly ball, which landed in his neighbor's yard by the bedroom windows. His neighbors were Mr. and Mrs. Gorski. As he leaned down to pick up the ball, young Armstrong heard Mrs. Gorski shouting at Mr. Gorski, "Sex? You want sex? You'll get sex when the kid next door walks on the moon." I will close with that, with one possible correction. We actually have some folks that work for NASA, and they told me that, yes, the essence of this story is absolutely true, but it's a little in error. So I'm not sure which version to believe, but the essence is absolutely true. That Neil's words were not, his words were one small step for, one small step for man, one giant leap for manly Klein, and then it was "Good luck, Mr. Klein." And so they said that the challenge was with those connections way back then, that they couldn't hear very clearly. And so it wasn't one giant leap for mankind, but one giant leap for manly Klein. So take it, one version is correct. I'm not sure which is, but what a story of patience and waiting patiently, huh? So I hope that you'll take some of the ideas, and not just the very funny story I ended with, as things to practice in terms of moving whatever feels like a mountain to you in your life. And maybe it is something personal, maybe it is something in your professional life, but to know that besides your own good efforts, that there is a principle and a power and a presence that you can tune into at a higher level than you probably have been, that will move your mountain somehow, some way. Yours is not to figure out the how. Yours is to trust in the Spirit working through you. Namaste.